friend, Coach Jude, all of the questions. What we thought we'd do this week, we'd answer some of the questions that came up last week from some of the social media. So we've got a few questions to answer. And what I wanted to do was put a few questions to Coach Jude, since he mentioned last week that he's turning 50 this year. So I want to delve into that a little bit more and understand some of his motivations for training, how he sets goals around training for longevity. So first off, Jude, why train at all beyond 50? So what is your motivation to train?
I like the way the 50 half centuries put out there as if you shouldn't train beyond 50. So why train beyond 50? Well, certainly like my sort of why it's changed over the years for sure. So I've always been a competitor. I've a number of sports through rugby league, sprinting, bobsleigh, powerlifting. Spent a lot of time around sport. Now that has changed. CrossFit came into the scene for me when I reached the age of around 40. Now that's about a 10-year spell that I've done at CrossFit. Now I certainly went down the competitive route of CrossFit. Now any sport that you do, anyone who's done sport will know that takes its toll. So I'm at the stage where that has taken its toll, and I'm no longer training for competition. I am simply training to look good, really. If I'm honest, I'm trying to look good. But I will come back at you with the why. I've never needed a why. I just never needed one.
So you've always trained, throughout your whole life. You've always had a strong motivation to train, and we're talking about training, not exercising, right? So training with a goal and with a purpose in mind.
Yeah.
And obviously that goal and purpose have changed over the years. So what is your goal now? You sort of mentioned.
So yeah. I mean, like you say, I've always trained. I believe, like for me, training is it's sort of I love it for one thing, and it's also like I treat it as a privilege. It's kind of like the sort of it's the way we as humans express what we can do with our bodies, and so I treat that as an absolute privilege. So in terms of like how things have changed and what I want to do. Longevity, I'd say, has become my goal. Training for longevity, which means to be able to keep doing what I love doing for as long as I possibly can. Which obviously means I've had to restructure the way that I do stuff for sure.
That's cool. So training for longevity, that obviously is a goal. What I wanted to ask you is, or wanted to delve into is. How smart is that goal? So when we talk about things like goal setting, often we talk about SMART goals. So that means, is it specific, measurable, achievable, and relevant? Those things. So no. Well, so okay.
Yeah,
so
okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So
So
if I can expand,
longevity, you can expand.
So if I can expand on that. So when you're given a task to set to go through goal setting. You're usually given a set of SMART objectives to work your way through. Now, I'd say with longevity, I have to be very fluid with that as a goal. One, we are mortal, therefore I do not know how long longevity is. So I'm not training for the Olympics in 4 years. I'm training for an unknown quantity of time, hopefully a long time. And also, I've got a bit of an ecosystem balance going on in my body and a set of limbs that really don't care for what SMART goals or time perspectives or limitations I put on that. They could wear out at any stage. So I find putting SMART goals to longevity quite difficult to do. And then there's also the looking at training. We're constantly, I'm learning all the time about training. So I've done tons of different methodologies of training, and I'm constantly having to change that because I think, here we go, CrossFit, this is the way to train for longevity. And then all of a sudden I find out, okay, that's not going so good. I need to reflect on that, and I then might need to make some changes.
Re-evaluation of the goal. So
Constant.
Coming back to the goal in mind.
Yeah.
So it's obviously it's easy to define a goal. If you are kind of in performance sport, for example, it's easy to define something that you're interested in achieving, a weight loss goal, for example. So lots of people come in with a specific goal in mind of, I want to lose 10 kilos, or I want to look good in this dress or at this wedding, for example. But actually the goal goal of training for longevity is slightly different. It's going kind of beyond the smart, in a sense, beyond the time measured and beyond the...
because obviously I knew you were going to ask about you told me you were going to ask me this question, so I kind of had to look at, so how do you train for longevity? So I certainly had to reflect on what do you do for longevity, because it is very, very different to training for something quite specific, and like I've already alluded to, my knees don't care how long I want to train for. When they want to give up, they're gonna let me know.
So this comes to actually Flick's question from last week of what does training for longevity look like? What does it look like to you now?
Okay, so again, I've spent a lot of time. In fact, I've been working on this for years. I wrote a master's training program because I just felt the volume that people were doing was just too much. I get fed up with seeing the age is just a number post put up by people who haven't been there yet. It's not just a number. Things start to happen, and stuff becomes harder to do. So what does it look like? Okay, so number one that I've learned quite recently, really from my studies with PM nutrition, would be that it has to start from the inside. So number one would be inside first, nutrition. Get your nutrition right. Make sure you're feeding yourself from the inside right first. That'd be the first thing. And I'd say that goes for anyone really. We've talked about what's the foundation layer of training, getting things right, be it gaining muscle, fat loss, whatever. It starts with nutrition, right?
So that's all of those part of those things that you can control. So that's number one thing you can control is what you put into your body. Yeah.
So training for longevity. Number one, take care of what you put in your body. Number two would be managing stress. So that's something that over the years has increased. So that's something I now need to manage quite. I need to give
it. Got the answer on that one, yeah. I
don't
think anyone does.
So I think my latest book was is it Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, or Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. That's my latest book. Again, it's another stress book. Yes. So that it's a difficult one, but what I can manage is the training stress. So training is a stress. Yeah. We put our bodies under stress, and that's certainly something that I feel I can manage and need to manage, and that includes the intensity. So when we talk about the intensity levels of training, that is a stress. That's the amount of stress you're putting your body under. Now that deteriorates as you get older. You need to be more and more careful of the amount of intensity you subject yourself to. So managing stress, obviously, along with nutrition, I need to get my sleep right, 7+ hours recovery. Yeah. So managing intensity, I'd say, would be the next thing to get in line in our kind of foundation of building blocks.
So you say those steps to then achieving the goal of longevity, or the process-based goal of longevity, is controlling those things you can control, getting your nutrition right, getting your training right, the stress on your body right, and just generally managing stress.
Definitely get those things in place first.
So what are the habits? So like we talk about sharp habits or creating a pirate map for the success. So what are those daily habits that you would do?
Okay, so I've got those daily habits. Can I first? I want to tell you about the training first, because I know Flick asked about this. So I want to make sure that I can kind of like tell her how I would train for longevity. So you need a plan. You need a structure to what you're doing. So we've talked about that. It's certainly something I know that you wanted to talk about as well, is training versus exercise. Yeah. So having a long-term plan is making sure that you are training. You are training for something rather than just doing random exercising. So have a plan. That would be my next thing. As you know, I always train with a strength bias, but I think that gets more and more important as you age, like for a number of reasons. Avoiding atrophy is one of them. Our muscles do start to deteriorate as we get older, so I think the training bias towards strength becomes even more important as you get older. So I'd say more resistance training. How do we structure that? That's something I'm working on. You know that we're working on that, and that's something that we're going to be working on a lot in the future. I think we're going to call this base method that we're going to be putting together. How we will train. So we're going to use the foundational movement patterns. Again, we've talked about this a lot. Making sure that we're squatting, hinging, push, pull, lunge, carry. And I would also add in there doing some mobility, stability, anti-rotation stuff in supplemental ways. So that's how I would structure it using those foundational movement patterns. And that's what I would do that, and then making sure that we're managing the sort of the cardio work, that it's not.
So you'd still add in cardio work. It's still
absolutely. But I do it in a much more aerobic fashion, limiting certainly balancing out the amount of multimodal intensity work that I do, and doing more sort of steady state aerobic work to recover.
So well managed, and obviously keep coming back to this thing of evaluating, so re-evaluating where you are, so that you know that you are managing the stresses on the body. And obviously adapting to the situation that you're in.
We've all been there where we're too sore the next day to train. So we had a great we did Murph, and then the next day we couldn't train. Was that well? Okay, it's a hero. Was that slightly different? But if you are unable to train well for the next few days, or be able to put the intensity in, then that was a non-effective day of training. So managing that is definitely something we need to make sure that we are doing. And fun, making it fun.
Yeah,
right?
So actually, this comes into
fun.
something I was going to ask you. Longevity, fun.
Okay.
We all have busy lives. There are external stresses, things that you can't control that happen in life. What motivates you to keep going and keep training, keep coming in the gym every day, as I know that you do, throughout all of these other things that happen in life? What motivates you?
Okay, so through having a business where I am selling memberships, or did have, I met with this really unusual thing of people want to have fun while they're doing this. That's new to me. I've always trained because I love doing it. So making sure that people have fun is, I like Glassman's statement on this. Like, the fun is in the community, right? I can train on my own quite happily. I like solitude. I like darkness. I don't.
I think it comes down to what kind of person you are, doesn't it? So whether you are like task oriented, or whether you've got process or outcome based goals. If your goal is process based, then having the community and having the fun element is really important, because you can't sustain motivation forever.
No, absolutely. You're right there. So we talked about longevity as being like, how do we achieve longevity? And one of them, you've got to enjoy what you're doing. Now, that's easy for me. I love training. Not everyone does, and so putting fun element into it is definitely something that we need to look at, and everybody needs to look at. So you've got to actually enjoy it. It's no good doing the perfect training program for you if you just don't enjoy it, because longevity won't happen. So fun, and that's why we like class-based
absolutely
training, right? Because we can train together.
Even though we've got different goals, we have completely different sets of ambitions and sets of goals in mind. I do have some very outcome-based kind of weightlifting type goals. You've got very process-based goals, but actually part of the fun of it, part of it that does keep me motivated, is training together with you and training in class. So I wouldn't keep doing it if it weren't for the fact that there were elements of fun involved.
And
also actually realising that you are achieving your goals is another big motivator for me, especially when you've got outcome.
Yeah, and I think one of my favourite takes on this is when it comes to fun, because my training can look quite boring. My training doesn't have that much. They're constantly varied. If we look at that, my training is not constantly varied. I choose the exercises that I know work best, and I stick to those in patterns. I don't constantly vary it to try and keep shocking my body. That's not what I do. So constant variations. Now, going back to my favourite sort of take on this, is that no one gets bored of looking good, right? Or performing well. So if your training is making you look good or perform really well or get you results, you don't get bored of it.
That should keep you motivated going forward.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Perfect. Well, hopefully Flick that's answered your question on training for longevity. I've got one more quick fire question for you dudes. It comes from Kevin. If you could do just one exercise, what would it be?
Right, Turkish get up. I talked